Hello everybody, CVPY here. Today we'll be analyzing some tanks from the United States Army during World War II. Now this includes tanks like the M3 and M3A1 and the M5 Stuart. Sadly the M2A4 is not in Gates of Hell, but also tanks like the M24 Chaffee and other weird modifications like the M8 Scott. So what to know about these tanks is that they were usually used for reconnaissance, but early war they were very good infantry support vehicles. So without further ado, let's get into it. So let's first talk about the tank that started it all for the US Army, the M3 Stuart light tank. So during the 1930s and 40s, the US Army saw the power of the Wehrmacht through their excellent use of tanks, Luftwaffe, and artillery to overwhelm French forces in the invasion of France in the 1940s. They decided that because they were so behind, they needed to change some stuff. At the time, the US Army was using pretty outdated designs, with designs such as the M1 combat car, the M2 light tank, and the M2 medium tank, which were all basically horrible by the beginning of the war. They decided that the new tank would be based on a new chassis, that being of the M2A4, which was a modernized version of the M2 light tank with 37mm gun. This new tank was called the M3. The M3, of course, was basically just an up-armored version of the M2A4, but this was enough to propel the US Army into their new doctrine of light tanks. Anyways, the M3 was then replaced by the M24 and the M5A1. However, the M3s still serviced the US Army till the end of the war, but in limited numbers. The M3 was basically the embodiment of how the US viewed tanks as just basically infantry support vehicles, but that changed at the end of the war. So now let's get into stats and variants of these tanks, starting with the M3. The M3 is arguably one of the best starter tanks you could ever get for any nation. It comes with 10 to 44.4 hull armor and 12.7 to 38.1 turret armor, already better than most early war tanks that you'll find. It also comes with a pretty fantastic gun. The 37mm gun M5 L49.9 can penetrate up to 95mm of armor at 10 meters and 52mm of armor at up to 150 meters. On top of this, it comes with 5 Browning 30 cal M1919A4 machine guns, one of which is for infantry members to fire. However, it does come at the hefty price of 5 research points, but you do get speed, as this thing can go 58 kilometers an hour and has a fuel consumption of 91 liters per 100 kilometers, basically meaning that this thing can go pretty far pretty fast, having a max range of 224 kilometers before finally running out of fuel. Now, of course, what would be a vehicle without its adversaries? Of course, the biggest threat to you is going to be the Panzer 3s and 4s, since they're pretty heavily armored. The Panzer 38s are also kind of a threat, since their 37mm gun could completely destroy you if their shots are well placed. But a good well-placed shot to the turret cheeks, or just the gun mantlet in general, should detonate the ammo and immediately explode the Panzer 35 or 38. Also, when you're dealing with heavier and harder tanks to pen like the Panzer IV, the M3 tends to struggle a lot. However, shooting one of the corners of the hull should be able to detonate the ammo stored there and immediately explode the tank. Now, the M3 technically does have variants, but they're kind of underwhelming, so I'll just go over them quickly. There's the M3 Late, which is basically just an M3 with a different cupola design. And then there's the M3A1. The M3A1 is not bad per se, but it basically kind of sacrifices 2 machine guns, which are on the sides, for a bit better armor. Of course, you're not really going to be sticking with the M1 for too long, so the M3A1 is kind of pointless, but then again, you know, it's a funny little gimmick tank if you want to play around with it. Then we have the M5A1 Stuart. This is basically just a better M3. It has the same speed at 58 kilometers an hour, but a bigger fuel tank at 340 liters. On top of that, it has a better consumption at around 105 liters per 100 kilometers, and it has a better max range at 320 kilometers. It basically has the same amount of crew as the M3, coming in with 5, that's including an infantry member, but the regular tank crew is 4, and it also comes with a machine gun on the back for an infantry member to operate. It comes with the 37mm gun M6, which surprisingly actually, because it is longer, for some reason it has less pen than the 37mm gun M5. It has better hull and turret armor though, since it has sloped armor now. It has 10 to 63.5 hull armor and 12.7 to 50.8 turret armor. It is way better than the M3, probably not in the penetration department, but definitely in the supporting infantry department. It also has kind of a useless variant, the M5A1, but that one basically just adds a little armor plate to the side where the top machine gun is, so it's not really that useful. And then there's another variant that I couldn't really get a lot of gameplay with, that being the M8 or the M8 Scott. This is basically just an M5 with a 75mm M2 howitzer literally slapped on top of it instead of 37mm. This is way better at destroying fortifications compared to the 37mm gun, and can destroy things like machine gun nests, sandbags, entrenchments, foxholes, basically everything. It has the same speed, fuel consumption, everything as the M5, but comes with that 75mm M2 howitzer, which has a little bit less pen, doesn't come with any AP rounds, only heat rounds and HE rounds. And its only coax or machine gun in general is the M2 Browning 50 cal that could be operated by the commander of the tank. Other than that, this is a pretty good vehicle, but just mind that the turret is open top, so be careful for infantry members throwing grenades in there. And then finally, we have the M24. The M24 is no stranger to rough situations. This is basically the pinnacle of light tank technology, essentially just being a mini Sherman. It does have a little bit less speed at 56 kilometers an hour compared to the 58 that comes from the Stuarts, but is definitely the better light tank. It literally comes with a 50 cal mounted on top for infantry members to use, and comes with a crew of 5, 6 if you're counting that infantry member, and it basically retains the same amount of speed while literally just being a mini Sherman. I mean, the gun is literally the same exact thing as the 37, but just with more high explosive filler, coming in at 91mm of penetration at 10 meters and 74mm of penetration at 150 meters, hell, even having 22mm of penetration at 200 meters. And for being the last light tank that you get, this is a pretty good reward. Basically, this is just one of the best tanks for you to operate at early to mid-war, and it's relatively easy to get to. At least it's easier to gain the KB tanks from the Soviet line. So this tank is basically just one of the best to get ever. So I would definitely recommend that you get it. And without that, I mean, I guess that's all the light tanks. So if you guys like that video, then please don't forget to subscribe and like. I'm always trying to make my editing styles better for my viewers to make it more interesting. And yeah, that's the video. See you guys next time.